Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Redford, and this is the follow-up. Coming up on tonight's show, it's 1 week before Election Day. However, tens of thousands of Americans have voted already, the result of expanded early voting options, both in-person and mail-in voting. With the increase in voting options comes controversy and misinformation, some questioning if we can trust the results, and others wondering if it's safe to go to the polls with such division in the electorate. Tonight we have two people who work in the front lines of our election process. But first, we have viewer reaction from last week's show here on the follow-up when we focused on education in Michigan, where the latest numbers show students losing ground academically and rates of absenteeism on the rise. Here's what one viewer had to say about absenteeism.
You have a great show. I like it very much. It's informative. But one of our students, absentees, are born out of the lack of interest. Either they're too smart and they don't find challenging, or they're too much on the pad and they're suffering from a great deal of isolation and depression. It's not that they're not smart. They have no motivation. They don't care. That's the bottom line. But secondly, they need to have more of a humanities program in these schools. The arts and entertainment and humanities. I'm an illustrator and painter. I work with kids, and it shows a great improvement in their condition as academically if they can give them the creative arts before school even starts in the morning. They do that in Europe and it works, but we don't want to get bogged down too deeply in policy where we forget what's really needed. God bless you.
We appreciate the feedback there, and we'd like to hear from more of you to help drive the conversation here on the show. You can do that via social media on Facebook. You can email us, you can leave a comment on YouTube, and you can dial into our follow-up hotline, as that viewer just did, to voice your opinion or suggest future show topics. And if you'd like to watch any of our past shows, you can log on to our website at deltapublicmedia.org. As for tonight's shows, our guests, you can see them right there. We're both dialing in virtually. We have Melinda Billingsley. She's the communications manager with the Voters Not Politicians group, and Manary, the veteran Midland County clerk. Nice to have you both on the follow-up tonight. Let's talk first about the level of misinformation. A lot of it out there that many people, for one reason or another, questioning the election results. Of course, President Trump certainly has fueled that fire over the last few years, and so did Hillary Clinton back in 2016. So, Ann, let me start with you. As a county clerk, done it for more than 30 years, what's your reaction to all this misinformation when you hear it, and how do you ensure the election results are accurate, at least in Midland County?
So what I like to tell people is that when you hear information on social media, do some checking, but ask the people who are involved in the process. Call my office. We are more than happy to talk to any individual about the process. My local township and city clerks also are very happy to talk to anyone about the process. We want you to feel comfortable. We want you to understand that we have integrity, that we are working hard to make sure that every single person who comes to the polls on election day has a good experience. Every single vote is going to count in Midland County. We have great equipment that we use, and we're very excited about early voting. So I hope we get to talk about that in a little bit, because early voting has been a boom in November. So
we are definitely going to segue into that in a moment. Let me go with Melinda now. Melinda, this issue of having sort of free and fair elections are really fundamental to the work your organization does at Voters Not Politicians. How do you go about communicating with that? I know you're doing a lot of that during this election time, but do you feel sometimes like you're taking 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, because you're getting a lot of pushback a little bit from extremists, I guess?
So in our work, we're definitely always concerned and keep an ear to the ground about what others are saying. But when we communicate with our public and with voters especially, what we really try to emphasize is that here in Michigan, we have a really strong democracy. We have good processes and regulations in place to make sure every vote is counted and that every eligible voter is able to make their voices heard, we have some of the safest, most secure, and modern and accessible elections right now that we have ever had in our state's history. And so, for advocacy organizations like Voters Not Politicians and other organizations, what we are really trying to do is just communicate that to voters so that they can keep their faith in our election processes, because our processes are good, they work. We just need people to continue to trust in their election officials and in the process.
So let's go to this expanded voting rights in recent years have led to a lot more voting. In Michigan, which implemented 9 days of early in-person voting, it kicked off over the weekend on Saturday, actually. The numbers show it's been very popular, so much so between, let's see, 25% of the registered voters in the state have cast ballots already. There's the numbers right now. 250,000 people cast ballots those first 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. Again, that's 1.8 million folks. That's of Sunday. And the other graphic we have there is about national. 30 million ballots had cast of 2024. That's 100 million voted early in 2020 because that was during the COVID year. So any idea who these folks are? Are a lot more younger voters getting out? Are older voters getting out? You can't really tell if it's more Democrats or more Republicans necessarily, although in some states you can register as one or the other. Maybe they have an idea. Any idea who these folks are that are voting early, or they just sort of, everybody's trying to get the handle of this thing here? Melinda?
So I think from the evidence that we've seen, it really is across the board. People are really excited about early voting, which we love to see, because when we were, campaigning to get this passed, we told people early voting is going to be helpful for all voters, especially those who have a more busy schedule or might work on election day. But every voter is able to take advantage, and that's what really what we're seeing. Communities across the state have seen a huge uptick in people making use of early voting, and that is true with geographic diversity and age diversity. So it really looks like across the board, every Michigander who is able to is trying to take advantage of this new opportunity.
And to you, how did the weekend go? It's the first time you've had to sort of oversee this early in-person voting. This is a lot more work for you and your staff, so how did you handle it, and how did it go?
So we were actually very surprised by the number of people who turned out. We only had 900 voters total in February for the presidential election. We had 900 voters on day one, and we have continued that trend here in Midland. We're over 4,000 people showing up to our early voting site. And with absentees and early voting, we have over 27% of our registered voters who have already cast a ballot. So I think it's wonderful. I think that people are taking advantage of it, and we're very excited to see everyone showing up. Everyone's in great spirits. They're enjoying the process, and so we're very happy to have everyone come out and do the early voting.
So you just have one early voting location in Midland, right? Tell us about that in terms of how that went. Maybe people had to wait a little bit longer. So talk to me about that, and also as a result of this sort of experience, you won't know, it's going to go on for another week, whether or not you might want to expand to some other locations.
So yeah, we have found that we did have a huge, as I said, uptick for this November election. So we do intend to find a bigger location. Our lines were about an hour and a half long on Saturday, which is a little bit longer than I would like to see. But we're kind of constrained by our location. So we're hoping that in 2026, 2028, we'll be in a bigger location and we'll be able to accommodate a few more voters at a time. But again, we were perfectly fine in February and August because we didn't have the number of people turn out that have turned out for this November election. So we're glad to see people voting. And again, I would agree with Melinda. We're seeing people across the board. We're seeing young people. We're seeing older people. Everyone's taking advantage of early voting, which I think is wonderful. It is we got a lot of people out there working. We got a lot of election inspectors working. We always need more people. So if you're interested in volunteering, contact me. Reach out to my office. We'd love to have you.
Okay. So that sort of bucks with some of the, I guess, critics out there, let's say, with expanding voting options. It opens the door to maybe more problems, less oversight, or other issues. For example, some don't trust putting ballots in the drop boxes that we see around the country. Over the weekend, as you know, we heard reports of people setting fire to drop boxes in Washington State and Oregon. Of course, these are sort of extremists trying to impact and undo the expanded voting process. So either one want to take that question or that comment?
I would just say briefly that Michigan has instituted new rules and regulations from Proposal 22.2 that talk about how drop boxes now have to be, they have to have video, there's certain specs that they have to abide by. And so those folks in Washington and Oregon that decided to light up those ballot boxes, I don't think they realized that they were being videoed. So here in Michigan, you're going to be videoed and we're going to find you and you will be prosecuted. So please make sure that you take that to heart when you decide to make decisions that aren't appropriate.
Melinda, I don't know if you can
And
follow up on that.
yeah, I would just add to what Ann said. It's important that voters make sure, or they keep in mind, we can't let go of our democracy in times of fear. It's important to stick with it. So even though you have these bad actors and extremists who will try to disrupt the process, we're not going to win by sort of giving up. So it's still the absentee voting and using drop boxes are still a very valid and secure measure. Like Ann said, we have security measures in place here in Michigan. And similar to the way that you wouldn't stop going to a polling place if someone rammed their car into the building, which is just as extreme as lighting a drop box on fire. Just because we have bad actors who are trying to disrupt the election, we can't let them. We have to continue participating in this process as fully as possible.
Sure. And Melinda, staying with you, in 2018 and 2022, voters in Michigan passed expanded voting rights, and your organization was very much at the forefront of that. But anti-voter extremists are trying to undo it all. They want to get rid of all kinds of things. Can you expand on that? What are you fearful of what they're trying to undo?
Yeah, so with proposals 18.2, 18.3, and 22.2, Michigan voters really chose to expand their voting rights and strengthen democracy in Michigan. And because of these reforms, Michigan has become a national model for pro democracy reforms. Like I said earlier, we have some of the safest, most modern, and most accessible elections here in Michigan right now that we have ever had in our state's history. And we're really setting a standard for the rest of the country. Unfortunately, there are those bad actors, both in sort of an activist space and even some who currently hold elected office, who would still like to undermine the will of voters and claw some of that back. Now, with these new expanded voting rights and our new expanded ballot access, we put that in the Constitution so that no one can take that away from voters. So that's one thing that we're really proud of, the work Voters Not Politicians did to help get Prop 22.2 passed, because as you can clearly see, voters are really happy with their expanded rights. They are going all in on early voting, and we don't want to let anyone take that away from us. So we're really glad that because it is a constitutional protection, voters are going to continue having that right in Michigan.
It's interesting because these new laws have expanded our opportunity to vote, which is a good thing. From a county clerk's perspective, and also maybe from a taxpayer perspective, like Ann, this is a lot more on your plate as a county clerk. You've got to get more staff. You've got a lot more on your plate. Plus, there's a cost to taxpayers. Maybe that's the one downside to this, right?
Yeah, I guess you could say that there's a downside to it with the cost. But at the end of the day, the voters did vote for this. They supported early voting. Yes, is it costing money? Absolutely. But we're all buying in, right? So it's not just the county, it's the townships, it's the city, it's the state of Michigan. We're all buying into this. This is what the taxpayers wanted. So we are making sure that we are fully staffed. We have at least probably in Midland County, we have 9 to 15 people working each and every day at the early voting site. But you know, it's worth it so that people feel like their vote counts. And that is the important part about this whole process is that people go to the polls on election day, or they go early vote, or they absentee vote, and they know that in Michigan, because of the laws that we have in place here, that their vote is going to count, just like Melinda said.
All right, let's segue into sort of the safety and security at the polls. We touched on that a little bit. We talked about somebody setting fire to some of these mailboxes, but there are reports of election officials sort of beefing up security around the country, bulletproof vests, having snipers at the ready, using drones. And is security a concern? Is that something you're thinking about to protect voters, protect your poll workers? And if so, kind of what's being done? Maybe you can't tell us all, but that's something you got to be thinking about, right?
Absolutely. We think about this every election cycle. It doesn't matter if it's 2024, if it's 2016, 2018, 2020, it doesn't matter. We're always thinking about the security of our election workers, of the people who are visiting our polls. We want to make sure that everyone feels safe and secure and being able to vote. So we have meetings at the state police, the city, the county, the prosecuting attorney's office. We meet, we talk about where we might see issues. We talk about beefing up patrols, and all of the basically city and county officers are on duty all day election day. So you'll see a very large police presence here in Midland County because we want to make sure that everyone feels confident and safe that we're not going to have issues here. I don't know what about other communities, how they're handling it. I would assume that they're doing some of the same things, beefing up their patrols and so on and so forth. But that's what we're doing here in Midland.
So Melinda, you work out of Detroit for your organization. They had some issues back 4 years ago in 2020 at I think at a polling site in the city of Detroit. You're recruiting a lot of people behind your effort. What are your thoughts on this, and if there's some concerns going into this election, and depending the outcome, which way it goes?
Yeah, so we're definitely making sure that we are prepared. One thing that Voters Not Politicians is doing right now, in partnership with a coalition of organizations, is recruiting nonpartisan poll challengers. And the main role of that volunteer opportunity is to have folks who are serving as a voter advocate in a polling place. So just making sure that every eligible voter is able to cast their ballot and making sure that processes are being followed. And also, that means that there are other people in polling places, in early voting sites, who are just on the lookout. They're, watching what's happening, they're monitoring to make sure that everyone, whether that's, election workers, whether that is voters, whether that's just people in the community, everyone is following processes, following the law, and making sure that our elections are running smoothly. So it's not just on our election workers and our election inspectors to be on the lookout for things. We also have poll challengers, nonpartisan poll challengers like Voters Not Politicians is recruiting. And then there are also poll challengers with the Democratic and Republican parties. And, for the most part, what we've seen is that everyone has that same goal of making sure our elections run smoothly and are conducted fairly.
I thought it was interesting over the weekend, because you've heard this issue time and time again, that reports of non-citizens are being allowed to vote, with so many more migrants that were crossing the border in recent years. How do you counter that talk? I think they said in Virginia they had 1,600 ballots that they were concerned about that might have been folks that were non-citizens. Of course, it's illegal to vote and be a non-citizen. Is that a much ado about nothing, or is that something we sort of have to pay attention to? Is that just sort of more misinformation? Because really, that's not really happening a lot.
I cannot emphasize strongly enough that reports of widespread voter fraud at every level and through any venue are false. What we know is that there are not large numbers of non-citizens voting in any elections across the country, and especially here in Michigan. Like I said, we have really robust systems and processes in place when it comes to voter registration. So it's very much not an issue. And I cannot make that a
Right.
strong enough statement.
Yeah, there's been no evidence of that since the 2020 election, and I'm glad you're clearing that. And I'm sure that's the same case in Midland County. You're not coming alongside a lot of non-citizens who are voting, right?
Absolutely not. That is not happening. As Melinda said, we have very strict laws here in Michigan, and if people would just like look at our laws and see what it would take for someone who's a non-citizen to vote, they would understand that it is nearly impossible. Has it happened? Yes, but I will tell you, in the entire state of Michigan, it's been a handful of people, and once they were informed that they were not able to vote, they immediately was like they backed off and said, oh, we're so sorry, we did not know that. And so now we have a different process in place that they're not given the same expiration date on their driver's license as people who are citizens. So it does make a difference, and it is flagged in the qualified voter file. So people who are not citizens are not voting. Dead people aren't voting. Only people who live in Michigan and are qualified and registered to vote here are the ones who will be voting this election. Sorry, my light just went out from my office. So yeah, we have very stringent rules, and we will follow them, and we will only let people who are eligible vote.
So let's move on to sort of like the voting process itself. Are both of you sort of finding voters who maybe aren't completing their ballots correctly, or they find it confusing? And then you have sort of these expanded voting laws, where do I vote? How soon can I vote? And as far as the ballots are concerned, are some maybe aren't completing the nonpartisan side of the ballot? So for both of you, are you educating? Are you training? Are you guiding people? Are you doing it day of, week before? I'd like to have you both expand on that and how much coaching some of us need.
So for us here in Midland, we do election inspector training for every election, and so we go over the ballot itself, and we give our inspectors information on what they can provide to the voter. So whether it's specific instructions about straight party voting, and if they want to split their ticket, how they can do that, making sure that they know that there's a backside to the ballot for the nonpartisan, for the proposals. All that information is given to individuals at the polls. Our Midland Daily newspaper here does a voter guide that's done by the League of Women Voters. That information is put out at least, I think it was like 3 weeks before the election. It was put out, so that information is out there. Gives individuals instructions on how to be able to complete their ballot. So we try to do voter education as much as we possibly can.
Melinda, is Voters Not Politicians involved in that process, guiding, mentoring, coaching, training, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so Voters Not Politicians has been involved in this process. I think we started doing education about Proposal 2022 last year, so probably last spring. In 2023 is when we started just educating people about the new processes or the new voting options that are available to them, that they have, early in-person voting, making sure people are aware of absentee. That's just in terms of the general kind of here's how you can vote. These are your expanded opportunities. And then leading up to this election, within the last couple of months more, we have also been doing that increased voter education to make sure people know about the specific deadlines for this election, know what is on their ballot. We have been emphasizing a lot to people to do the nonpartisan section of their ballot. Millions of voters leave that section blank every year, and it includes a lot of really important elections like judicial elections. Obviously, it is not a requirement for voters to complete it, but we think it's very important that voters make their voices heard in these sections. So we have been doing all of that. I would say advocacy organizations like ours really focus on the beforehand And then we kind of have to leave it up to voters and poll workers once people get into that polling location. Obviously, we're not campaigning or anything. Once people are in their polling location, there are laws. So from there, it's really up to our poll workers. And luckily, they are well trained to help answer those last minute kind of process questions that voters can have.
Hey, the last couple of minutes we have left, I have to ask you both. You know, a lot of us are sort of tired of this process a little bit, and you watch it on TV and the ads are nonstop. They get them on the radio. It's becoming a bit exhausting. We're also, man, I cannot wait till next Tuesday when it's over. And yet, having you both on, and you're working on the front lines, you do this kind of stuff every day, both Ann and Melinda, how are you keeping your enthusiasm up? How are you keeping the passion? Or are you kind of like, okay, I'm ready for it to be done now? Tell me about that a little bit. Ann, how are you keeping the enthusiasm up?
So I don't watch TV. Truly, I have not watched TV
Except
in the
PBS,
last
of
4
course.
years.
Okay.
Except for when we got grandkids. Okay, we watch Bluey,
Okay.
and Peppa Pig. But that's outside of that. I don't watch TV. So the ads don't bother me, and I've been in this game long enough that I'm kind of like immune to it. I look at it and say, oh, yep, there's another political ad on the radio or whatever the case may be. I started working in the county clerk's office and grew to love the work, and so I made it my career. So I'm in it for the long haul. I'm here for at least another 4 years, and I love my job. I love what I do, and so it's really hard to take away that enthusiasm for me. So
Okay. Melinda, the last word on that. You've got a lot at stake representing an organization that's doing a lot of good, so that's got to keep you going, right?
Yeah, I would say I truly believe in just the general concept of democracy. I believe that our society functions better when we are all able to participate in our democracy. So that's sort of what keeps me going. I don't watch TV, but I do watch YouTube, and I get plenty of ads, and I do ignore most of them. But the ones I don't ignore are the ones that state the simple fact that voting has power. Every individual person's vote has power, and that every vote matters in every race in this election. So that's what I keep in mind. Even though it gets chaotic and messy, our democracy can still work, and we have the power to make that happen.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you both for the work that you do, and good luck this week. And that's our show for tonight. Be sure to join us next Tuesday night for the follow-up. That will be election night, of course, and we'll have two political science experts on to weigh in on all the twists and turns. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a great night, everyone. We'll see you next week. Well, welcome to the follow-up after show, kind of our web extra for our viewers who watched the big show. They had a lot more to talk about, so we're going to expand on what we had in the big show. Of course, we've got Melinda Billingsley, the communications manager with Voters Not Politicians, and Ann Manary, the Midland County Clerk. They were on the big show, and they joined us for the after show. And as we're talking right now, we still have time on early voting, right? We can go in. We have 9 days of early voting. As of this show, we're kind of had 3 days under our belt, so I think that's an extra sort of message to our viewers out there that you still have time to vote. How can they do it?
absolutely, you still have time to vote. You can go to the early voting sites here in Midland. Wednesday and Thursday, they're open from 11 to 7. On Saturday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they're open from 9 to 5. But you can also absentee vote. So again, it's not going to the polls, it's going to your local clerk requesting an absentee ballot. And I think by our voter turnout, because it is very good right now, we're so excited between the early voting and absentee, that if you decide to go to the polls on election day on Tuesday, I don't think you're going to find some very long lines in Midland, because a lot of people are taking advantage of early voting. So I hope that everyone does that.
I have to ask you about your poll workers. Like you told me before, you've been a county clerk for over 30 years. Do you have some folks that have been there just about every year, or some are sort of dropping off and leaving? Are you getting new poll workers, and are those new poll workers sort of like hesitant, wondering what they're getting themselves into? So clear that up for us, I guess.
So I do have some poll workers who've been around for as long as I have been county clerk, and we love them for all of their expertise and knowledge. We do have new workers that come in, and we try to assure them that they're going to be working with seasoned election inspectors, and so never fear, we're going to get you trained up and get you ready to roll. We love to have new people. We love to have younger people. We want anyone who is maybe has a question about the process, or perhaps a question about maybe the integrity of how we do things. We want you as a poll worker because we want to be able to show you that we follow all of the laws in Michigan and that our elections are safe and secure. So those are the folks we want to have come work for us. We want to show you that we here in Michigan know how to run elections, and we do it well.
All right, I'm going to move over to Melinda. Melinda, what I didn't ask you about is a little bit more about the Voters Not Politicians group, how long you've been around. In years past, I've had a couple of your colleagues on, I think 2018, 22, now you're on with us. We mentioned at the beginning that fundamentally free and fair elections is something you work on, but it's that and more. Tell us more about the organization and some of the issues that you like to work on.
Yeah, so Voters Not Politicians is a pro-democracy organization. So anything that falls into that democracy category is something that we focus on, or something that we try to educate others on. So for example, we have our election work. A lot of that comes on our C3 side. So we do things like voter turnout, voter education. We actually have a program, just one more plug for early voting, called MichiganEarlyVote.com. For those of you who live across the state of Michigan, anyone can go put in their address and find their early voting site or absentee drop box location. And then we also have programs that are more focused on legislation. One thing that we started recently in 2023 is a grassroots citizen lobbying program. And what we do is we train our volunteers to go to their office hours or coffee hours with their elected representative and talk about pro-democracy issues. So within the last year or two, that looked like talking about Proposal 22 implementation and advocating for laws that would allow these new regulations that voters chose to be actually implemented by our clerks. Also advocating for funding. We have volunteers who go talk to their legislators about the budget and how we need to fund our elections. And that's something done through a grassroots lobbying program. It really all comes back to the first line of the Michigan Constitution. All political power is inherent to the people. And what we aim to do at Voters Not Politicians is give that power to people and show them how to use that power to make their voice heard and have an impact in our democracy.
And you're doing some fundraising, so it's going to take donors as well to help the work that you're doing. So I hope our viewers respond to that. It's important work that you're doing, so I appreciate that. So Melinda Billingsley from Voters Not Politicians and Manary, Midland County Clerk. Guys made a good team. Thanks for joining us on the follow-up the big show and the follow-up after show. Have a great night.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And make sure to click that bell icon to stay notified when we upload new content. Videos like this are only possible because of viewers like you. To help support this channel, click on the link in the description below. We'll see you next time.